Words, and it's just amazing to see everyone here. It's welcome, Salmin, Charles. Welcome. It's great to have everyone. I think we're having a couple of folks join in, but we'll I think get started. To be mindful of everyone's time, especially considering the different time zones we're in. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. We're really happy to see all some familiar, some new faces on this call. Welcome to the Little Big Convening. Gail and we started having a conversation about this idea of a convening as a really informal setting where we'd be able to kind of get together with some of the folks who've taken part in the Little Big Fun courses over the past 3, 4, maybe 5 years for some people, not as a way of talking about the work that we do and the fundraising that we do, which is what we tend to talk a lot about, but just as an opportunity to connect with each other, opportunity to connect with other people who are doing really amazing work. So this is our third edition. So we started off in June, had another session in July, and this is our third edition. And every month for me, this 1 hour feels like a ton of just inspiration and joy. First, it being able to see familiar faces of people doing just great things and just kind of powering through what seems like a really difficult time for all of us. But then also to hear some amazing stories. And this month, we're very excited to have Romain Vakilitabar. Please do correct me if I'm wrong.
Nailed it. No, that was perfect.
We did try that a few times before this call. It's wonderful to have you here, Romain, with us, and we're excited to spend this hour with you. Now, before we get started, we do have a little quiz, which is something that we'd like to do. So before the meeting, we asked Romain 2 truths about himself and 1 lie. And Romain has generously shared with us some incredible truths and a lie about himself. So on your screen, you'll see a little poll, and the poll will have 3 facts, and 1 of these facts is not true. Curious if folks can figure out what is untrue about Romain. Okay. It's a tough one. So we've got a tie. I'm just going to share the results here real quick. So we've got a tie between the hiking through Europe homeless and hitchhiking coast to coast in South America. Romain, would you like to shed light on which one of these is the lie?
Sure. Well, first of all, I didn't know how to answer that question myself, whether I should answer truthfully or whether I should throw people off. So what's actually true is I have hitchhiked from coast to coast across South America. I did that in 2014 from Peru, from Lima, Peru, all the way down to Curitiba in Brazil. And quite a fun adventure. Hitchhiked primarily with semi-truck drivers and have quite some incredible stories, funny stories to share from that. And then I also spent a couple of weeks testing my mental resilience in a way, and traveled through Europe without spending $1. And by de facto, found myself sleeping in a lot of bus terminals and befriending a lot of individuals who are experiencing homelessness. I have not ever tracked the gorilla migration in Rwanda. I don't even know if gorillas migrate, actually. So yeah, I would like to go to Rwanda one day, though. I've heard incredible things.
Well, thank you so much for sharing some incredible facts. When I saw those 3, I thought you were just giving us 3 lies. I was trying to figure out the truth. But thank you for sharing that. With that, I think we'll in a second have a short introduction from Gil of Romain and his amazing accolades over the year. But I think just to kind of also see who else is here joining us today, I'd love for us to go around and do a quick round of introduction. if everyone would love to share their name, any organization you're associated with or working on, and if shortly, just what you do with that organization, if you'd like to share. So I'll kick it off. My name is Abhinav Kanal. I'm from Nepal, and I run Little Big Fun with Gail. And I also run another nonprofit called Bean Voyage, which is based and works in Costa Rica with smallholder women coffee producers. I think I'll pass it on to Danny. Oh, I think you're muted, Danny.
Sorry about that. Just quickly walking around, but don't mind me if I'm moving while I'm talking. But yeah, so I'm Danny, and these days I'm a purveyor of coffee as well. Or I guess not necessarily. You're also purveying education, Abby. But yeah, I have a business called Peak State Coffee, and we're making a coffee with benefits product that we're selling online. And just really excited to see a bunch of familiar faces today.
Awesome, thank you. Charles, would you like to go next?
I'm Charles, and I work with Aircool Africa, and our goal is to try to innovate and design technological products to improve people's lives that are less privileged, because most of the products don't cater for them, but we are trying to cover that gap. Thank you. Nice to meet you, all of you.
Nice to meet you too, Charles. Salmeen, would you like to go next?
Hey everyone, I'm so happy to be here. I see a lot of familiar faces. Yay!
Yay.
So yeah, I think I know everyone here. So my name is Salmeen. I am the co-founder of She Stars Africa, and I basically work with other female entrepreneurs to help them either build their business or transform it to succeed in the digital world, basically.
Awesome. Hi, Salmeen. Wahed, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, my name is Wahid Hussain. I'm joining from Dhaka, Bangladesh. It's 9 p.m. here, so definitely other spectrum of the world. As a profession, I worked for my own company called Tiger Bow. We help Bangladeshi women artisans make bow ties. This year, we're starting making new products. We're collaborating with the U.S. government here, U.S. Embassy here in Dhaka. Besides this, I am a consultant on entrepreneurship for the last 2 years. I'm working with the U.S. Embassy collaboratively, different programs. Like currently, we're working on a cross-cultural exchange program for U.S. students and Bangladeshi students for their capacity building. Besides, also, I'm an organizer of Unleash Hacks this year. So a lot of things are going on, and also designing an agro bootcamp for a Netherlands-based NGO here in Dhaka.
Amazing. Incredible things going on for everyone.
Wow.
Camilla, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, my name is Camilla. I am the communications intern for the Little Big Fund. And yeah, I haven't met all of you, and unfortunately my camera today stopped working, so you can't actually see me, but I'm here. And it's really great to meet all of you. I've been reading about all your work, and I'll be posting on social media hopefully about all your work really soon. So it's really great to get to know you.
Awesome. With that, I think I'll pass it to Gail, if you want to kick us off, Gail.
Oh, it's always so strange. I'm Gail, and I started the curriculum at Watson several years ago, and then just have always enjoyed so much the process, but realized that I needed to step back a little bit and have it reshaped and taught and scaled and organized by some others. And Tessa came for a while to help launch Little Big Fund. And then now Abby is working to do that with Camilla, and then another intern named Adara. And I just love all the ideas that are bubbling up for Little Big Fund, and this opportunity to see all of you again.
Thank you, Gail. Awesome. So I guess we'll kick start. I think before we pass the mic to Roman, and there's so many things we want to hear from you, Gail has prepared a very short kind of welcome introduction. So Gail, if you'd like to give that introduction, and then we'll, I think, kick off with some questions.
Well, I hope it's short. You know, Roman has so many cool things that he has done. I don't even know where to begin. And, you know, if I were standing at a lectern, you know, and you're introducing someone, you know, they'd be right next to you or they'd be behind you and you'd see them start to flush and blush and, you know, smile. And I'd maybe only just occasionally look down at a piece of paper. And so I'm missing some of that. I'm missing some of that creativity that comes when you're physically with other people, but also the creativity that just exudes from Roman. I mean, he to me exemplifies creativity because he's curious and he's brave and he always just wants to kind of, you know, learn more and bring different ideas together. And we saw just a glimpse of that in his lies and his truths. Especially, you know, this courage to travel homeless and not spend $1 and talk about experiencing different worlds and trying to understand them on a really, you know, personal gut and important level. You know him all through Watson. He was the vice president at Watson back in the early years, and he was integral in developing the curriculum, which is kind of this hybrid curriculum that you all know, right? Again, two different ideas together, this sort of experiential, hands-on, alternative way of learning with a university kind of structure. So again, working to bring different things together to make this third thing, right? And you know that he was an apprentice CEO. Now, what a cool title, right? An apprentice to a CEO. I mean, he probably made that up, not made it up, but he probably invented that as well, right? And one of the things that he did there with Unreasonable Group was to travel, I think, 25,000 or more nautical miles on a ship and go into different communities and meet with the people there and try to find out the potential, not necessarily to bring a program in or to extract a program, but to find out what's potentially doable. Again, that's a creative effort, right? I'm going to just come and meet these people and see what can be made from it. But more recently, since 2016, he has founded Pathos Labs, and it's a nonprofit laboratory that is changing narratives for narrative change. I think it's a brilliant tagline. One of the things that they're doing is they have this immersive media, which many of you are probably familiar with, and you get to learn stories of others through virtual reality. And by doing that, you get to be not just alongside somebody while they're telling their story, you get to be like so close to them that it might be a little even sort of unsettling. You get to look directly into someone's eyes. You get that chance of opening up that back part of your brain, which is the patterns. And then you get to be, whoop, whoa, that pattern just has to go because there's that person right there. I can practically touch them. So I think that that's a really another great example of not only his creativity, but his constant drive to upset patterns and bring people together so that we experience viscerally, intellectually, emotionally, just what it might be like to be somebody other than ourselves and our patterns. Pathos Lab, he's going to talk some more about this, but they're going to be having this summit called the POP Summit in October of 2020. And 50 of the country's leading minds, along with 50 of the country's most prolific entertainment leaders, are going to address one question: how do we make a more equitable world through the stories that we tell? I just would like to hand it over. I mean, I could say more. He's been on TED Talks. He's my friend. We've worked on a film together. He's very bold and kind and always just trying to reshape what we see and what we think and what we believe. So thank you, Roman, for being here.
Gail, this is such a delight to be here, and thank you so much for the kind words. I'm blushing a little bit. Truly, I mean, I'm honored, and everything that you've done, Gail, is just a testament to who you are. And thank you for supporting the creativity of your friends. And I'm so lucky to have been part of just the brainstorm and the creative projects with you. And so yeah, I'm honored to be here. Abi, should I just talk a little bit, or would you prefer question and answers, I'm up for either.
For sure. I'd love for you to kind of continue on that introduction.
Sure, you got it.
What
Perfect.
you're working on, what are you excited about, and then maybe we'll just have it kind of an informal conversation with some questions.
Perfect. You got it.
Folks have any questions, feel free to jump in as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and I do want this to be participatory, so I don't want to just, you know, be communicating unilaterally. So yeah, making it more of a conversation, stopping me if you have questions, or yeah, that's my preferred mechanism for driving this conversation forward. But yeah, just to pick up off where Gail left off. So I've been really interested the last several years in narrative change. How do we change how individuals are perceived through the stories that we tell about them? That's really what caused me to leave Watson in 2016 and start Pathos Labs. At the time, I was really focused on virtual reality. A technology that was really, really hot back in 2016. And the reason why virtual reality was really interesting to me was because it was a Trojan horse in a way. We were creating content that people wouldn't necessarily watch on YouTube, for example, but would be desperate to watch because it was in a VR headset. And the power of that is, you know, nowadays we're so isolated in our ideological echo chambers, in our bubbles, that we're only consuming the kinds of content that we want to watch, the kinds of content that concord with our way of viewing the world. And as a result, when we're isolating ourselves in these ideological bubbles, well, first of all, bias grows, hatred compounds upon itself, and we're not necessarily challenging our perspectives. So what was really interesting for me in virtual reality was that all of a sudden the technology was so hot that anyone would put it on just to say that they've tried a VR headset. And by essence of that, we were able to essentially create these stories that challenged their worldview in a way. So one example of that is we did a VR experience called Strangers. And it takes place in the lives of 3 women in America who, on the surface, couldn't have anything in common. One is a Black Lives Matter activist in St. Louis, right outside of Ferguson, Missouri. And this was just a year after there was a lot of, obviously, a lot of activity with Black Lives Matter out there for the killing of it wasn't Trayvon Martin, but for the murder of a young Black man. And so we spent a couple of weeks there interviewing this individual who was really active on the front lines. And then we went over to rural middle America in Oklahoma and spent a couple of weeks with a really conservative individual who was a farmer. And then we spent a couple of weeks with an Iraqi refugee who had just arrived. And so these were the 3 characters whose stories we told. And, you know, obviously they have evident differences just politically, but religiously, culturally, different parts of the country. But the story that we were trying to tell was that even though they have obvious differences, there's also this narrative that weaves between them. And so the piece was called Strangers. And we had some support from Google, who let us use some of their best VR technology and camera system to tell that story. And the point of this experience was that what would it look like if we take this story back to rural middle America, right? Where the individuals who try on the VR headset in a part of the country that actually is experiencing a lot of the effects of this tech gap, where a lot of them don't have access to this technology. What would it look like if we take this VR experience back and show them the story where they see themselves represented, right, through the story of this conservative woman in their community, but also by seeing their that character or that individual, rather, it's not a character but a real individual, seeing the commonalities that exist between her and an Iraqi refugee, for example, and a Black Lives Matter activist, for example. It can challenge that prejudicial pattern of thought that exists, could obfuscate the fact that it's, you know, us versus them, and obfuscate the fact that there's nothing in common that we may have with those individuals who we consider to be other. And then the same thing goes for, you know, bringing this story to St. Louis and getting the individuals to identify with the individual from their community, but also by essence of their identification with her, identify with the other two women. So it was really this experiment in how do we challenge in-group and out-group membership, us versus them. And simply stated, you know, because it was in a VR headset, this story was something where we saw lines, you know, 2-hour lines waiting to try on some of these experiences, which was really cool. And, you know, how do we just put that film up on YouTube, for example? The likelihood that people would watch it would probably be pretty low. So that's what really got me excited in virtual reality to begin with, was it could be a Trojan horse to communicate certain ideas and challenge the biased patterns of thought that exist that make equity really difficult in the United States. So that was the first couple of years. It was a fun experiment. While I was still at Watson, actually, when I had this idea kind of percolating in my mind, I spent the weekends putting together a virtual reality camera. And actually, Danny, I'm glad Danny's on the call. He helped me a lot with this because it required 3D printing some parts and then plugging in GoPros into the 3D printed molds. And Danny, who he was really helpful. He helped 3D print some of the parts. So I'm grateful for him. And, you know, he had obviously a big role in, you know, if we didn't have this camera system that we were able to put together, then none of this would have happened. So it was really cool. It was like very much a ground up, like passion project, just like, wow, if we could create a camera, then we can create this content in a really powerful way. And so that's what we ended up doing. We took the project or some of our film VR experiences to film festivals. One of them won an award at a film festival in New York, which was kind of unexpected. And I didn't even go to that film festival, but received in the mail this little statue saying that it was the audience choice, which was really unexpected. It was like a little trophy, which was really fun to receive. And so, yeah, that was the last couple of years. However, VR, the sexiness, the appeal of it kind of wore down. And what we saw was that it was really hard to get the VR experiences to some of these communities. We had done a little bit of work where we took, we got a bus and turned it into a VR kind of a mobile studio. And we traveled across mostly middle America and showed this VR piece to individuals who are to exclusionary beliefs, you know, us versus them. And so we spent a couple weeks on the road doing that, which was really cool. But yeah, the appeal of VR kind of wore off a bit. And I started really thinking about, like, what is the next Trojan horse? And so I've done a lot of work with behavioral scientists. I've, you know, been really active about, like, emailing them and contacting them and having conversations with them, because really the goal of the work is how do we How do we challenge these biased belief systems? How do we tell stories in ways that flip the script in ways that make equity more possible? And so talking to these behavioral scientists, something eventually became clear. There have been a couple of case studies that have shown the power of scripted content on public perceptions. And the first example is one of my favorites, actually. It has to do with drunk driving. So back in the mid 80s, the prominence of drunk driving was really high. People were dying because of drunk driving or drunk driving related accidents at an all-time level. And a Harvard professor of public health was trying to figure out how to reduce the prominence of the drunk driving and the drunk driving related deaths. And so he was thinking to himself for a long time and finally had this stroke of insight. So he calls the TV writers of two of the most popular TV shows at the time. One was Cheers. The other was The Cosby Show. 30 million people tuned in to one of these two TV shows on a weekly basis. And he asked the TV writers to introduce into their scripts mention of the concept, the word designated driver. Before that point, designated driver was not part of this cultural vernacular. But quite literally overnight, people were introduced to this concept in ways that really had a huge positive effect on behavior. And what we see is pretty immediately after those concepts were introduced into the scripts, where millions of people were introduced to them, or introduced to the designated driver concept, the prominence of drunk driving accidents plummeted. So what that does is several things. One, if you tell someone to stop drinking or stop driving while drunk, it's not going to work. Behavioral scientists say that like people do not respond to being told what to do. They don't respond well to being told that their current behaviors may be problematic. It's something called psychological reactance. You know, you react psychologically to someone telling you that you're wrong, to someone telling you that there's a better way. And so instead, the most powerful way to move society is through the what's known to be something called norms engineering. If you can engineer or create or architect a new social norm, then you're more likely to want to adhere to that norm, largely because biologically we want to conform to our social group, right? If we don't conform to our social group, then we're outcasts. And that's, just an evolutionary quality. So long story short, behavioral scientists have said that the most powerful way to shift society on a massive level is through something called norms engineering. And all of a sudden, people were watching Cheers and The Cosby Show introduced to this concept of the designated driver as if it was, something normal. Like the characters were just talking about it in kind of like subtly in a conversation. And it showed an alternative behavior that could really be powerful in reducing the negative or the prominence of drunk driving. So that's the one story that I really like. Another more obvious case study for this is what a lot of people in the media world have started or have called the Will and Grace effect. And Will and Grace, I don't know if you all have watched that show. I've never seen an episode. But what's cool about it was the first TV sitcom that a lot of people watched that introduced an openly gay character in a favorable light. It was a sitcom, and people fell in love with this character really quickly. And this was at a time when public perceptions of gay people were still, I mean, really negative. I think at the time, 15% of the country was open to gay marriage. 85% of the country was vehemently against gay marriage. This wasn't that long ago. This was about 20 years ago. And by simply introducing a character that was well perceived, that wasn't, you know, the butt of the joke for being gay, who was presented as a respectful, kind individual, funny character, whose sexual preference identity was not necessarily like used for comedy, you know, that wasn't the joke, but was just, you know, that was one of his identities, and that was it. It really normalized the gay experience, the LGBTQ experience in the United States. It gave people the authority, the confidence to come out as gay in their families, because they felt like if they did so, they wouldn't necessarily be banished. They wouldn't be ostracized. And so a lot of even people outside of the media world point to Will and Grace as being the reason for why over the course of the last 20 years, openness to gay marriage went from 15% to now it's about 80% of the population is okay with gay marriage. And obviously what we saw several years ago was that it became nationally permissible for gay people to get married. And so this is how society changes, is through the perception of what's normal, of what's acceptable, of what's accepted. And so I've been spending the last year or so really trying to think about, you know, how do we introduce new norms that predispose our world towards more equitable ends at a time where we need that more so than ever before, at a time where we're, go for it, Gail.
This is a point where I wanted to just jump in, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but
not at all.
I think that it would be really interesting to hear from you. What are some ideas and suggestions for how these little big believers, you know, can be working to, you know, upset the norms, right, and bring different groups together? I mean, I know you know about some of their projects, but so working in a different country, right, and there's got to be norms that are, you know, each one of these believers are coming up against, right? So what suggestions or tips do you have for taking your experience of, you know, bringing different groups together so that they can understand one another for this bigger purpose? How might that experience be applied to some of their work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gail. So I think, we did some work this past year with a lab at Stanford, really focused on finding ways that we could increase compliance to public health guidelines surrounding COVID, largely because in the United States, there are a lot of groups of people who are non-compliant to these CDC and WHO guidelines. Shocking, I know. The United States is so reactive to any sort of information from, you know, government officials. But one thing that we saw that was really interesting is that a lot of the people who were talking about COVID were talking about it in the wrong way. And this was some kind of as folks in the social sector, social entrepreneurs, they were incidentally kind of, without really realizing it, normalizing non-compliance. You know, so many news reports were showing the crowds of people at the beach who weren't socially distanced, which made it permissible for people watching it to partake in that behavior. They thought like, oh, if so many people are going to the beach, if so many people aren't, wearing a mask, then why should I won't be looked down upon if I do it, because obviously so many people are doing it, and that's maybe the norm. And so I think like when we talk about the problems that we're trying to address, it's easy to normalize and reinforce the problem. I think too often we talk about the problem in a way that normalizes it, that gives permission for it, because if the problem is so prominent, then okay, then there isn't maybe much that I should do about it. Or then if everyone litters, then I don't feel as bad about me littering, for example. So I think it's about like, how do we tell the stories of a norm that we wish to create, as opposed to the norm that we're trying to avoid. And that was something that like was really, really interesting in the work that we did with Stanford, was just how many stories we saw of individuals normalizing the problematic behavior as opposed to normalizing the desired behavior. So that's one thing that really kind of came to mind, that really surprised me doing that work. So I think like, as it relates to the work that I'm currently doing with, we're essentially bringing together TV writers and leading minds. A lot of them are behavioral scientists, diversity, equity, inclusion leaders. It's focused on how do we take TV shows that millions of people are watching on a day-to-day basis, and how do we normalize a society that we wish to live in? How do we normalize, the good that we wish to see in the world, to make it all the more accessible and more likely to happen? And that's one thing that I would encourage, anyone in the social space to really focus on, is how do we tell the stories that normalize the good instead of normalizing the bad? And I think like a lot of stories are told with obviously really good intentions, but from a behavioral standpoint, maybe have that negative repercussion that people don't really expect going into it.
Abhinav, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, first of all, just on Friday, I was watching a documentary on a book called Orientalism. I'm sure we've at some point talked about it, by Edward Said.
Yeah, we have, yeah. Totally.
Part of the conversation in this book, which was written, I think, in the 70s, was about how the media and how art and culture in what he calls the Occident is portraying the Orient in this kind of exotified way, especially focusing around the Middle East and what the concept of the Middle East having this kind of set biases as part of their script and as part of their costume, as part of their conversations. And I mean, the fact that it's still prevalent and the fact that you're working to change that actively, it's amazing and super inspiring. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you got it. One quick example though is, like right now we're seeing a lot of films on TV that are really trying to challenge kind of like the hatred or the bias against Black people, right? And what's really interesting is a lot of films are coming out about like individuals. Like the first one that comes to mind is Just Mercy, right? Based off of Bryan Stevenson's book, featuring Michael B. Jordan, a really beautiful film. But it's all these stories reinforce the criminality and Black person association. Even though Michael B. Jordan is a lawyer representing these falsely incarcerated individuals who are behind bars, still, the way that we see that is Black person criminality. Even though it's really focused on challenging maybe some of the biases. And of course it's told in a way that's really loving, where you fall in love with the characters, which is good. but it's still actually like you said, Api, it's like the representation of Orientalism, for example, is dangerous. I mean, this book was written in the 70s, right? And we haven't seen much progress being made on that front at all. We see a little bit more nuance. We see more shows like maybe Romain is one that has been touted as showing, a more nuanced depiction of someone from the Middle East, because there's really not a whole lot of nuance there. But still, it's like, if we try to humanize the other, sometimes that's not good enough. Sometimes we try to humanize, like for example, Just Mercy, that this Black individual who's been falsely incarcerated, but what it's doing unintentionally is also kind of creating a stronger pathway between Black person and criminality. So I think like it's about really going beyond that we really need to do, introducing kind of subtle concepts, showing Black prosperity, that there aren't a whole lot of films that are doing that. Black joy, there aren't a whole lot of films that are portraying that. And a lot of the diversity folks that I've had the privilege of talking to are really pushing for those kinds of narratives. And I think it's really important. So yeah, sorry, Abby, I just wanted to piggyback on what you were mentioning, because I think like, even though it may seem like we're seeing a lot of progress, there's still a lot of progress to be made. And I think a lot of these storytellers don't necessarily realize what they're doing by accident.
For sure. Yeah. And on that point, and on the concept of progress, right? I think a big part of what you've talked about so far has been about kind of the pivoting that you've done. You still have some of that focus on VR, but it seems like the initial days, at least the times when I remember watching My Beautiful Home, I watched that
Yeah.
one. And I remember just being awestruck by the storytelling, and the fact that the way you did it was just the kind of ideal idea of entrepreneurship. You just have an idea, you pilot it, you test out different things, and next thing you know, you're in film festivals. And I think the transition from there to kind of this shift in the language around, like especially in media and kind of pop culture, has been quite interesting. But then now I assume with COVID-19, there's been another kind of pivot point for you. Gail mentioned briefly that you're working towards the summit in October. Is that still happening in person? What is the work towards it, and how are you having to pivot is my first question. And I guess a follow-up on that, piggyback on that is how do you, or when do you know when it's the right time to pivot as an organization leader?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Abhi. So yeah, I've had to pivot a lot in the 4 years, I guess. First of all, obviously started with VR being the unilateral way of disseminating our impact, so to speak. And yeah, My Beautiful Home was the first one we did, and I really appreciated doing that one. It was a story that challenges how people, mostly in the Western world, perceive Africa. I state that generally because that's how people in the Western world perceive Africa. But also it's about letting the individual, so it takes place in Kibera, which is right outside of Nairobi. It's known to be Africa's largest slum. But we let the individuals there tell their own stories, largely because when I was there, actually, I was there unrelated to My Beautiful Home initially. I was flown out there by a production company who wanted me to create a VR experience for a solar company that was working out there. And so, but while I was there, I talked to the individuals in the community, and they were like, hey, look, like all these white people come here and they tell this story of poverty and sadness, and it dehumanizes us. Like we see that, and the world looks down upon us because of the stories that have been told about our community. And obviously, like going to Africa's largest slum makes it a destination for a lot of filmmakers that want to capture, what poverty looks like, that poverty porn in a way. And so my beautiful home ended up being me saying, okay, that it is not my role to tell your story. It is, I want to hear how you describe this place that has been perceived to be, one of the worst places in the world, and they walked me through their community, pointing out all the beauty that they saw. And so my beautiful home was the manifestation of it, and took a lot of pride in that piece, largely because I feel like when we're creative minds, we try to control the story, we try to control the outputs, and sometimes the most beautiful, authentic thing is what is really what occurs and what happens when you put your intentions to the side and just listen. So that was like the first piece, and really proud of how that turned out. And the folks back in Kibera were really pleased by that piece as well, which was cool. But yeah, I mean, like VR, for example, I mean, I mentioned how the appeal was starting to wane a little bit. And, that's one way of saying it. Another way of saying it was that there was also less money in it than before. There were a lot less, there was a lot less interest in funding impactful projects related to that space. And I was seeing a lot of my peers in the VR space having to close down shop because all of a sudden they couldn't afford to continue doing that work. The inflow of cash was all of a suddenly stopped, and as people were kind of looking at the next kind of sexy thing. So for me at that point, it was like, okay, I guess VR I can't put all my eggs in the basket of this industry that I can't control, right? I'm at the mercy of where this industry goes. And that was a little bit scary, obviously. So I had to, pivot in a way where I was like, okay, maybe we're not unilaterally focused on VR, but more like tech agnostic, storytelling agnostic. And that's kind of what kept things going. So it was like that pivot was from a survival standpoint. Now with the summit, it was supposed to be in person in Los Angeles. It was supposed to be a little bit earlier. It was supposed to be in June. And we put that off. We're like, okay, maybe in October we can have an in-person summit. And then we're like, okay, maybe January 2021 we can have an in-person summit. And ultimately decided that, again, don't want to be at the mercy of a world that we can't control. And so better make do with what we got and try to make it the best possible experience that we can, given the constraints, the obvious constraints of not being able to bring people together in person. So we're doing it virtual. And trying to really challenge like the laws of like what virtual convenings should be or have been, trying to do a lot of like experience design, thinking outside of the box to try to make it really personal and connected. But yeah, like the benefit of that, there's several. I mean, one, we can bring more people together. Originally it was like 25 TV writers and 25 kind of leading minds. Now we're like, okay, let's do 50. We can do that. It doesn't cost us too much more to bring people together on a larger scale. So that's been a benefit. Another one is the fact that like right now, writers' rooms are kind of on pause. They're not totally sure when productions are going to start again. So a lot of writers have time, are exploring things. And this is the perfect time in order to get a lot of them involved. To think about their role in engineering cultural and social norms that make the world a better place. A lot of the TV writers only see themselves as entertainers. They don't necessarily think of the societal implications of the stories they tell. So this is a really cool opportunity in space to get them to really realize that they have more of a influence on society than they think. So, and then finally, I mean, the benefit of doing a virtual summit is the costs are a lot lower too, you know, having to find a space and, you know, get everyone to travel across the country, having to probably put them up at a hotel, was going to be really costly. And now that it's virtual, we're able to do it at a lower price point, which is really nice. So yeah, I think like that was also a pivot that happened out of necessity. And I feel like oftentimes we'll know when it's time to pivot. There's something that will nudge us in one direction. And I think like the mindset that we need in order to pivot smoothly is just being okay with it, not trying to control the experience, but listening, right? Like what I was talking about with my beautiful home and being in Kenya and in Kibera, and not trying to control the story, but listening and being present and letting it unfold as it should. I think like that when we have that mindset in terms of our companies, the pivot when we're listening to society, when we're listening to what's going on, will make sense. And there won't be a lot of, hopefully too much resistance in going with that once it becomes clear. So.
For sure. Thank you so much. And yeah, as you said, sometimes when you're keeping the ears open and the eyes open, the pivot just walks into the doors. Sometimes
totally, exactly. And sometimes it's just like one conversation, right? Like that you have with someone and you're like, wow, that's brilliant. I never thought about that. And lo and behold, you're doing that. And, you know, for me, it was hearing about the designated driver campaign and how all of a sudden, you know, like here was one example of how TV could be used to have a huge impact, just because one Harvard professor met 2 TV writers, you know, and I was like, oh, wow, what if we got 50 Harvard-like professors to meet like 50 TV writers, you know, to introduce new concepts in this really crazy time in our human history. Like, how can we predispose our worlds to a better, more equitable future? What new concepts could we engineer in ways that really encourage new behaviors in a way that really brings our world in the right direction? So yeah, it was just like hearing that story that led to that pivot, and it just made so much sense. So you're totally right, Abhi. Just like being open to that, for sure.
Love that. Thank you so much. For anyone who's never spent an hour with Romain, this is exactly how it feels like to spend an hour with Romain. He just started. It's already an hour. I do want to be mindful of folks' time, but I do want to also open up and make some space for any questions, questions unanswered that may be on people's minds and hearts. So just step back a bit and see if there are any questions by anyone else. Then I will ask another question. This is and this is I think Wahid, were you going to ask a question? I saw your camera on. No, okay. One question that I did have that I think is quite interesting for many of us that are building partnerships is that whenever I follow your work and read some of the things you put out there, I think the most recent thing I read was this kind of tips that you published in collaboration with MTV and some leading kind of thinkers about how to message during times of COVID. And I thought those tips were very kind of well developed, but you had a lot of partners working together and doing that. So I guess I was just wondering, in the short time we have, if you could share a couple of tips in building that kind of partnership when you talk about, you know, MTV, when you talk about Stanford professors, when you talk about just kind of the different partners that you're working with. What are a couple of tips that you might have for us in terms of building effective partnerships?
Yeah, totally. So I think like my number one rule of like, not that there's any rule, but like my the way that I think about it is that partners, like they want to feel like they're part of something big, right? So with the MTV one, for example, we worked with 45 behavioral scientists around the world to crowdsource these tips. And I sent emails to all 45 of them trying to see, top behavioral scientists to see if they could contribute an idea for ways that we could change messaging to increase the rate of compliance. So I mean, it was first of all, a lot of academics, they realize that a lot of the work that they're doing is only seen by other academics, right? And they want to have a larger influence on society. So that was like an easy ask. As far as MTV, for example, it was like, hey, look, like what we're trying to do is influence how we talk about this. And the individuals who would have the largest role on increasing compliance are these influencers, people who are well respected in the media landscape, whose voice gets listened to and is amplified on a really large level. And if we really want to curb the prominence of COVID, these are the individuals that we need. We've like crowdsourced tips from some of the leading behavioral scientists to make this happen. And would you be willing to help, have a huge impact on society by sharing this guidebook with folks in the entertainment space? So it's about like selling that vision, I guess, making them feel like their role is an integral one and something that could really have a huge positive impact in the world. Impact is like everyone in the world cares about how they can have a positive impact. And the sooner you're able to tell that story, the clearer you're able to tell that story. And the more you're able to showcase to a partner that they themselves are the ones that will help really move the needle forward, the more easy it is to get them involved. So yeah, I think I've been pretty good about partnerships. I'd say that that's one of like my superpowers in a way. I'm like I easily ask a ton of people and I get rejected a lot, and that's okay. But I think it's about really getting people to believe in the work and seeing themselves as part of something bigger than what they're traditionally doing day to day. And obviously that was at a time where COVID was the one thing that everyone was talking about, and being able to be affiliated, like MTV being able to be affiliated with these 45 behavioral scientists in this resource was something that was actually really easy. It just was one phone call and they were like, we want to be a part of this and we'll send it around and we'd love to be partners in disseminating this. So yeah, I think it's just asking a lot and creating a clear idea as far as how they can have that positive impact.
Thank you so much. I see Charles has a question. I do want to be mindful of your times. Can we extend the conversation for a few more minutes?
Yeah, that's totally fine on my end, but also completely understand if you all have to leave. So
I'm here to stay and listen some more. But yes, if you do have to drop off, that is completely okay as well. So Charles, if you want to ask a question.
Okay, so my question is, this is very, very insightful, especially for us social entrepreneurs who have to face a lot of people that we usually don't know their behavior, things that we can't really predict. So I faced this first in my pilots, like my first project. I was working to develop an air purifier because many people were using open flames and actually having these gases get into them. So my target market was the village population who haven't really usually had enough education on that. So it was one difficult thing to have a village population give them something you call an air purifier to get all these gases away. It's something so intangible. So I had a problem in trying to get them like feel this product, like actually be part of it. And I found a problem in a way that sometimes you tell them like they gotta turn it on and like switch it off. Sometimes you find that sometimes they don't do everything, yet they really need this because there is no really like tangible short-term results for like air purification. Like it's very hard to get them to actually use that product. This is why I eventually saw and started working with sensors where I could have self-working devices. But my biggest question was, sometime back, I think a year ago, I was part of a project where we were trying to work on boreholes around Uganda. So Uganda has this problem where we have very many borehole resources, but many of the boreholes, they put in a lot of money to buy them and they cost 10,000 between that range. But you find that people use them for about a borehole meant to be used for 30 years, works for 2 years and it dies and it's totally neglected. Yet the people there don't have water. So we try to interact with Engineers Without Borders from the University of Colorado, and they told us about this community they went to work with in Namibia, where they set up water committees in the village. They set up a solar water pump, and everything was pretty much set. Everyone looked enthusiastic about the project, and they set up a couple of schools. And then they left. They went back to Boulder. So they went back to visit after 1 year. They found that most of the project was vandalized. Like actually, if you would have like a communal water place, and you find that everybody benefits from that, they were really bothered because they wanted to keep on with this project, but by the fact that people that use the water could actually vandalize the products, like take the solar, take the pumps. How do you? Because that was like the fork in the road, because we couldn't continue. They couldn't continue with that with that project, because they couldn't try to engage people to sustain this project, take care of it, and use it to get their water. And because they had systems set, but it never worked. How do you work around that? Things like that, to get people to sustainably care for a project that benefits them clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reminded by the hundreds of times my parents told me to do something that was clearly in my benefit, right? And how I retaliated from that. I wouldn't listen to it because it was someone else telling me what to do. It was someone else telling me that my system or my way of doing things was problematic. And that, like, from an ego standpoint, doesn't sit well. It's also feels like, hey, you don't really understand me. Why should I just listen to what you want me to do when, like, I have my own life? And it's like I feel like it's that reactance of being told that your behavior is wrong. Here, there's this other behavior that you should do instead that will make your life better. It's like, oh, okay, like, how do you know what will make my life better? It's just that immediate reactance that I, like, as a teenager, felt. And I feel like if someone tells me that what I'm doing is wrong, or that I could be doing it better, I usually retaliate against that to some extent, especially if it's coming from someone I don't coming from someone who doesn't really know me. Like, parents is like, okay, like, you definitely know me really well, and I'll listen maybe a little bit to that. But I feel like it's the same thing, like when an outside agency who doesn't know your customs, your way of life, who doesn't take the time to understand the people, who doesn't even take the time to, like, make the people a part of the process of creating an innovation around maybe an issue that people are dealing with. I feel like that's typically the problem. I feel like there's a lot of Americans who go into countries thinking that a problem is a problem because it's just not something that is done in the United States, right? Like one interesting case study is the toilets. Like in the Middle East, my father's from Iran. There's the basically the hole in the ground toilet that you have to squat at, and a lot of Americans have been installing the potties that you sit on and to use the bathroom. And what was interesting is, we'd go to some of these markets and you would see footprints on the toilet seats. People were standing on the toilets as opposed to sitting on them, largely because, that's the way that they've always done it, and it's not a problem to them. So why are we trying to fix a problem that isn't a problem to them simply because it is different than the way that we do things, right? So I feel like that vandalism makes sense. I feel like even just like in the United States, I'm still befuddled by how politicians and policymakers don't invite the people that they're building policy for into the room to have them be a part of the process. Like, how is a government official who's grown up and gone to the Ivy Leagues or whatever, how are they supposed to know what's best for people who are experiencing homelessness? And they're typically the ones who are writing the policy around homelessness. So I feel like it's typically about just not having the buy-in, not having the trust. And I think like the best innovations happen when it's supporting someone on the ground who may have an idea for their own communities, who if it's coming from them, will have the trust from their other peers within that community to say, oh, okay, like my neighbor who I'm really good friends with has started using this product and says it works really well, or created this product. I now know that this is something that was built, by my community for my community. I feel like there's an element of trust there that really helps overcome maybe some of the challenges that we see a lot in the development world. Sorry, I know that was a longer answer, and I know some of you have to leave, so hopefully that was helpful, Charles.
Thank you so much. I don't know if Charles was trying to speak, but I think we lost him for a second there. Wahid, I know you had a question, so maybe we'll make this the last question, and then we'll.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, it is great to hear from Romain. It's always been inspiring, and that just inspired me to do something great from tomorrow. As you're speaking about, and you always help me on like how the narration should go for my organization or for some of my work. So one of the things that I'm struggling for last 4.5 years, I mean, not struggling, I mean, I just noticed that people don't perceive, I mean, a lot of people perceive what I do and understand. Some of them don't understand in a specific area that the number of impacts. Like, for example, in my country, some of the organizations just run a kind of a conference where like 1,000 people comes in and they say that we changed 1,000 people, and they have 4 members of family. That means I impacted 5,000 people. On the other hand, in my organization where I'm just changing someone's economic situation, and it's not just for a month, it's a sustainable thing. Like, since from the beginning till now, every year we work with 13 women artisans. Their income grows up by 50%, and the product, which a particular fabric or the product which is going to be extinct, it makes cool and people are appreciating. But when I speak for a grant or a partnership or peer, they said, you know what, you just have 13 people impact. It doesn't make a big sense. I mean, rather we will do something. I mean, we tried in different ways, like we try to understand what is the indirect impact, still like 113 lives. Whereas like if somebody is just running a normal program and for like 5 months, and they can say that I impacted 20,000 lives, because in Bangladesh you will get a lot of people in any event. So how we can pursue big partners? We really need to grow, and that's why we're going for another product, but still again might not be relevant. Like they have two options for a grant, like $50,000. They can say that you're going to impact 100 artisans with that amount of life. There is a school or like a childcare program which is impacting 1 million. So how we can narrate ourselves and position ourselves to make everyone understand the magnitude of the impact is different. That's why the number is lower than compared to the most of the organization.
Yeah, that's a great question, Wahid. I think so. It's tough. Like I don't want to give you an answer. Like I don't really know, right? And I'll start with that. I say like I think there's a lot of power in saying, hey, look, like here's the story of this one individual who we've tremendously impacted. This person, before we worked with them, what was here, and now after just a couple of weeks, or just after a couple of dollars, for example, they are now here. Like getting people to see that the delta, the change from here to here was worth it from a time standpoint, from a money standpoint. I think is a really good way to go. Say like, I would say, hey, we're still growing, right? We're small, but with only 1,000 US dollars, we have been able to impact these 100 individuals who are here to here. Imagine what could happen if we had $10,000. Imagine how many more people we could serve in this way. It's really getting people to imagine the potential, rather than describe where you are right now. Where you are, maybe you haven't impacted as many people as you would like, although the people you have impacted have been really impacted, which I think is a real testament. But it's about getting people to imagine that future and believing in it. So I would say that I wouldn't try to hide it. I think maybe like another thing you could do is change the metrics. Maybe rather than lives impacted, you could say like hours saved. I don't know if that makes sense given what you're doing, but like we've saved people 10,000 hours worth of hard labor or whatever. Changing the metric can sometimes feel a lot more pronounced in a way. Can get people to say, wow, okay, like 10,000 hours, that's a lot of hours that organization has helped people save. And I, again, don't know if that metric makes sense, but could be seconds, could be minutes, could be units. It doesn't necessarily have to be number of lives. And I think like those two things would probably encapsulate my ideas the most. But again, I don't really know the answer to that. But hopefully some of that was helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, like definitely the hours thing can work, and I will think about the metrics and we'll do that. Definitely. I mean, like as I said, that people understand. I mean, there is a significant of other don't understand unless and until we have a personal conversation or demonstration. Besides that, we are happy whatever we have. Like I was kind of frustrated for a while till 2018. People don't pursue, but everything is going very well. The direction I want since the last year's end, and this year even we're doing a good.
Cool. Yeah, just like real quick, I was just thinking, I think like changing that metric would make a lot of sense. I was thinking of just like one example, like let's say you helped someone get out of prison early, right? Rather than saying, hey, I impacted one individual, say, hey, I gave this individual 10 or like 1,000 days of their life back. You know, like, let's say you got them out of prison, 3 years earlier, or even like, let's say 1 year earlier, like I gave them 365 days back to them. That feels maybe more impactful than, hey, I helped one person through the program. So I think, yeah, reframing it that way makes a lot of sense. But huge congrats, Wahid. You're always pushing the boundaries and always working really hard, and I appreciate that.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So wonderful. I could keep on listening for so long. We might have to have a version 2 of Roman, right? At some point. I don't even know really how to end this in any way that's going to uplift what Roman has shared with us and all of you have shared, except to just say that, there's this, I like tarot cards. I don't know if you know them. They're sort of like gypsy card reading, palm reading kind of cards. I love them. And there's one card in the deck that's called the Hanged Man. And it's a picture, an image of this person and hanging upside down, and he has been tied to a tree, and he's very happy. And in this one particular deck, it's more of a male looking thing, but I don't see it that way. Anyways, it reminds me of when I was young and I used to hang upside down on the monkey bars, right? And the blood would rush to my head and I'd see everything so differently. And I knew that I was looking up at something that was the opposite of what I had just been doing before, right? I was hanging upside down in order to see the world differently. And I believe that Roman lives his life like that. And everything that he has talked to us about is about pivoting how you see something. You see a bottle and the bottle is containing water. What happens if you turn that bottle upside down? Then what does that bottle look like? What happens if you change the narrative from what is missing to what is potentially still there? And I just think he's brought a lot to my way of thinking, and I hope to all of you, about that glass half full approach, that let's turn this and let's literally pivot our head. Let's turn around and see what's behind me. Let's hang upside down and see what's above me. Let's take a walk backwards along the path, just for the sake of walking backwards, and see what happens and who you bump into. So live that life in the way that Roman does and that you all do, and challenge yourselves to think really literally upside down about things, and how that is a narrative change for you, and it could be a narrative change for the work that you do. So Roman, thank you for being so inspiring for us to live a life that way.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for the kind words. It's such a blessing to be here. And I know, I'm in presence of greatness too. And I feel weird in a way, being the one speaking, because I know you all have such incredible wisdom to impart. And I hope to get the chance to hear one of you speak soon. So thank you for the kind invite, Abby and Gail. Appreciate everything that you're building with the Little Big Funds. And yeah, can't wait to continue the conversation soon.
For sure.
Thank
We're going to have to ask
you.
you to make a podcast, just like a podcast series that we'd love to listen to. But yeah, thank you so much for making the time, and thank you for sharing with us. And thank you everyone else for being on this call and in the different time zones that we're all in. It's always the highlight of my month to kind of do these 1 hour sessions, because I just feel like with all the work that we're doing in the silos that we live in, you get to hear a little bit about things on social media of what everyone's doing, but having a live 1 hour just pumps me up with a lot of energy. So I appreciate the inspiration and the stories and the questions. And I hope, Roman, we can have you join us for another one of these. And thank you for all the amazing work you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Bye.